Securing Windows Server 2008. Objectives: manage security in Windows Server 2008 with various Windows utilities, discuss threats to Internet Protocol security, create Internet Protocol security policies, discuss network access protection, and install network access protection. The configuration is one domain controller and one member server, which is not a domain controller. This machine is a domain controller, but the other Windows 2008 server is a member server of the domain. It's not a domain controller. It doesn't have Active Directory installed. This is Instructor 2, but it's a member server. There's no Active Directory here. Creating a role-based security policy. On the domain controller, we open the security configuration wizard and we can view the configuration database. And we can see all the configuration settings of this server. We can look at a few if we want to. Those are the roles, services, and so forth. As we go through the security configuration wizard, we see some of the roles that are installed on the domain controller and installed features. And when we get to the Select Administration and Other Options window, we'll select Remote Desktop. Additional Services window, we can click Next. We review the list of changed services, and then we can click Next. We have the option of saving the security policy, which we're going to do. We're going to put it in the default location. We're going to call it New Policy. And the default is Apply Later, which is what we're going to do. And we finish the security configuration window. Working with Windows Firewall. What we're going to do is go to the member server, not the domain controller, and we're going to do a lab that allows the Program Explorer, not Internet Explorer, to go through the firewall. So we open the firewall. We want to allow a program through Windows Firewall. And we have the Exceptions tab, Remote Administration, and Remote Event Log Management. We'll check and we'll apply. And Remote Services Management, we'll click Properties. And a message box opens describing the effects of enabling this exception. It says this feature allows remote management of local services, uses named pipes and RPC. So we read the description. And on the Exceptions tab, we want to add a program to the program list, and so we'll browse until we find Explorer. Now remember, Explorer is not Internet Explorer. It's in Windows Explorer or Explorer.exe, it may show up as. And we want to add Explorer to the list. And we can close out the firewall. working with Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. This modifies a rule so that the member server allows an inbound remote desktop from a computer with network authentication. So we go to the member server and we need to bring up Server Manager. And under Server Manager, we want to configure remote desktop. We want to allow connections only from computers running remote desktop with network level authentication. And we're okay there. We open Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. May take a moment. We're looking for inbound rules. We find remote desktop and we'll go to the action menu. Enabled should be checked, and action allow the connection should also be selected. If not, we select them. We'll make the selections as appropriate. Okay, and apply them. And we go back to the domain controller. Search, and we're going to try to find remote desktop connection. There we go. We'll try to connect to the other computer. In this case, it's called Instructor 2. Your computer name may be different. And we'll wait a few moments. It tells us we can't connect to the remote computer. So we'll go back to the member server. If we still have Windows Firewall and Advanced Security open, we can check the property, select the property we had before, and go to Action and Properties. We'll go to the Advanced tab, and here we'll allow a domain user, domain computer, to be able to remote in. Now we'll go back to the domain controller and try to connect to Instructor 2. And this time we're asked for a username and password. And pretty soon we've connected through remote desktop. And there we see the remote window on our domain controller. Next, we're going to create a new firewall rule that blocks Internet Explorer. And for this, we go to the domain controller. Need to close out of the remote desktop. Okay, now we're at the domain controller. Need to bring up Server Manager. And under Security Information, there's a link that says Configure IE/ESC. And in this case, we see that the security information was turned off. So let's see if we bring up a browser, if we can go somewhere. Okay, so the security rules and the firewall allow us to open Internet Explorer and get out to the Internet. Still on the domain controller, we'll open the firewall, Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. We're using outbound rules, and in the action menu, we're going to pick a new rule. The rule that controls connections for a program is what we want to do, and we're asked for the program path for the program that we want to block. And we have to know the path to the executable is C:\program files Internet Explorer iExplore.exe. We could also browse to it. We want to block the connection. We'll block it for all profiles. We want to give a name to the rule. We'll finish. We come back to outbound rules and we see that the rule we just created called Internet Explorer is at the top of the outbound rules. We'll try to go to Microsoft.com, which is still in the address bar, and since we have this outbound rule, we cannot get there. So adding an outbound rule to the firewall prevented us from using Internet Explorer. We have a firewall rule for Internet Explorer, and in the advanced properties this is a private profile, and if we launch the browser we see that we can use the browser, we can use Internet Explorer. What we're going to do is have settings that apply only to clients on the internal network hosted behind the firewall. Working with firewall policies in the Group Policy Management Editor, you need to create a folder and place the export policy in it. This activity takes the firewall policy that you have set on the local system and applies it so that it is exported and becomes the firewall policy of all systems. The firewall policy is server fwpol.wfw, and it is imported into a group policy object. At the Windows firewall with Advanced Security window, we need to select the firewall, and on the action menu we want to export the policy. We need to find a place to put it, and so we'll browse, and in the root of C we'll create a folder and we'll save the policy there. Policy successfully exported. Under Administrative Tools, we need to open the Group Policy Management console. And if it's not already expanded, we need to expand the forest. Under the action menu, we want to create a GPO in this domain and link it here. This will allow you to create a group policy object for the firewall policy settings that can be applied to computer objects within the domain. So we have the new GPO dialog box, and instead of accepting the default name, we'll call it Firewall Policy Servers. Here's the policy we just selected. You may have to customize the view so you can see the action pane like that, and more actions. We'll edit, and the Group Policy Management editor starts. we'll expand computer configuration, and then policies, and then Windows settings, and then security settings, and then Windows firewall with advanced security. And we check the inbound and the outbound rules, and we see that there are no entries in them. So we can import the policy that we created. And there's the policy. Which is successfully imported. And the lab tells us after then to clear the policy. And the policy has been cleared. So in this lab we created a policy, we exported it, and then we took it and we imported it into group policy, and then we cleared it. Now we're going to work with Cipher.exe. We use Cipher to encrypt files, and for this one you may need to create folders. We do this on the member server. The description of this lab is you need to encrypt some local files, and you decide the easiest way to accomplish this is by using the Cipher utility. In this activity you use Cipher.exe to encrypt files and folders on a remote server. The first thing we do is make a directory, md The folders 70642 and chapter 10 are there. Those folders are there. We're making a directory called secret files. We need to use double quotes because some of the file and folder names have spaces in them. And we have two more directories to create. That was secret files. Then we have to create non-secret files. And secret files 2, and then we want to change directories. And we'll do a dir, and we see that the three folders are there. Now, while at the command prompt, we enter Cipher/K to generate a new EFS certificate for the logged on user. The command will return the EFS certificate thumbprint as shown here, and the certificate thumbprint is the hash of the certificate used to encrypt the session key for the user. So next thing we want to do is encrypt. And that has encrypted the secret files folder. You see that an E appears before secret files, meaning it's encrypted. We'll change directories into that folder. And then we'll create a text file. called called secretdoc.txt with the text, "This is secret information." Using the cipher command, we can see that the file is there and we can see that it's encrypted. And now we're going to move the file and see what happens to it. The command to do this is move, and in double quotes, the source file that we want to move, and we want to move it to the directory called non-secret files. And we see that one file is moved. Now we want to change directories to non-secret files. We type cipher, and we see that the file is there and it's encrypted. So even when we move the file to a folder that's not encrypted, the file remains encrypted. The rule is that files copied or moved into an encrypted folder will become encrypted, but files moved or copied out of an encrypted folder will remain encrypted unless the destination file system is not NTFS. We can also use Windows Explorer to encrypt files. We go back to the member server and open Windows Explorer from the Start menu. We navigate around to the folder and we can see that the secret files folder shows up in green because it's been encrypted. The other two have not been encrypted. They show up in black. We open Secret Files 2 and we'll create a new text document. Now we can right-click Secret Files 2 and go to Properties, Advanced, and we can select Encrypt Contents to secure data. And we can see here that Secret Files 2 is now encrypted. And we go to the properties of the file within the folder and we can see that its contents are encrypted to secure data. From here, if we click Details, we can list users who can access the file. They can be given access by adding their certificate to the document's properties. Working with Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer, MBSA. We go back to the domain controller and we need to launch a browser. Go to the downloads. Depending on how the website's configured, you may have to do a search for MBSA. We'll save it in the Downloads folder. And then we'll run the installer. Or maybe what I mean is we'll install the installer. And it's successfully completed. In the Start menu, you can launch the Baseline Security Analyzer. And there's the Scan a Computer link. This is the computer that we want to scan, the one we're on. And so we start the scan. And this can take a little while. When the scan is done, we have a report on details. We can see a few things. Automatic updates are not configured. Some of the user accounts have non-expiring passwords, is true. And we can browse through the list and see what was scanned if we want to. And then installing and configuring network access protection. This lab requires a DHCP server because it requires, it applies network access protection to the DHCP server. So we need to make sure that we have one installed and running on this computer, and we see that we do. Takes a moment to load. We have one configured already from a prior lab. There is no network policy server on this computer. We need to add the role before we can install network access protection. So we go back to Server Manager and the roles. Network policy and access services needs to be added. Network policy server. Looks like the installation succeeded. So now we can open the Network Policy Server console. And configure NAP, Network Access Protection. So we pick DHCP, to which we're going to apply NAP. And when we're at the end, we can click Finish. On the Network Policy Server, we expand the Network Access Protection folder and go into System Health Validators. And under the Windows Security Health Validator, which is configured, we look at the properties. And we want to configure. And once that's done, we go to the DHCP service. and click IPv4. Under More Actions, Properties, we have the Network Access Protection tab, and we can enable network access protection on all scopes and select Yes. We've done a lot in these labs to secure the Windows 2008 server. We've used various utilities to do that, discussed threats to Internet Protocol security, we've created security policies, and we've discussed and installed network access protection. There is a lot going on in these labs, and it's probably necessary to do them several times in order to master them. Any questions, please contact Randy Bellett, rbellett@ecpi.edu. Thank you.